My wife, Joanna Templer, looked at me, John, and let out an intermittent sigh. Listen, sweetheart, Gail needs someone to look at her hot tub. She wants to use it now that the weather is getting warmer. You know exactly how to fix it, and you can do it in an hour or so. I cast my wife, with whom I'd been with for 24 years, an assessing look. We had gotten married while we were still in college, she to get a teaching degree, and I to get a mechanical engineering degree. We had our first child while in graduate school. Jason is now 21 years old and working toward a degree in mechanical engineering. Joanna, after working as a teacher for several years, decided to make a slight career change. She decided to go into administration and has been working toward a master's degree in public education. She continued to study for several years and has now earned her doctorate and become a local superintendent of schools. I have a master's degree in engineering, and I have my own company where my people design and build everything from bridges to mechanical devices. It seems the whole world turns to my company for oversight and critical analysis of any new mechanical device. It may be hubristic, but my reputation is so high that companies hold their breath waiting for me to approve a new patent. Our second son, James, is now 18 years old and will soon be heading off to college. He hasn't decided on a major yet, but I'm sure he will choose a career in teaching, as he enjoys guiding and mentoring others. You'd think Joanna and I would have settled down by now. We both have great careers, our boys are honor students, and we both have our health. Joanna is a runner and regularly participates in 5K and 10K races. I do CrossFit and compete against athletes half my age. I've also done MMA and know how to fight if I need to. But over the last year, living with Joanna has become increasingly difficult. I thought hard about it, and maybe whatever it was, it all started before that. We moved to this gated community 5 years ago. The community was small and close-knit. Our neighbors immediately came to get to know us, and we were invited to numerous community events. I have always considered myself more of a blue-collar person, even though I wear business suits daily. I shed my jacket and tie as soon as I got to work. Joanna always wanted to be part of the upper class, and in this community we are considered upper class, but hard-working new money, not blue-blood old money. I made a couple of friendships for drinking beer and watching football. However, none of our neighbors are into NASCAR, so I have to watch the races alone. I don't really follow the drivers themselves that much. More often I watch the individual cars as various parts came into my field of vision during their development. I'm proud when a car that my company had a hand in creating comes to the finish line, even if not first. These races are hard on the cars and the drivers. Over the past 2 years, our neighbors and friends have learned that I am more than just an engineer. I love messing around with devices, learning about them, and repairing them. It's what I've always done. Perhaps that's what made me pursue an engineering degree. Suddenly, Joanna started taking requests from me to fix various household problems. One woman said her sprinkler system wasn't programmed correctly and the service company couldn't help. I got them to work the way she wanted it to work, even though it wasn't very efficient as she wanted to water the lawn. Another wife had me look at her pool control system and set it up so that the pool lights would turn on at certain times and off at certain times. You can see the schematic here. Joanna would answer the phone and then tell me who needed my help. I would set out to find out exactly what the problem was and try to fix it. Sometimes it was a legitimate call, such as a faulty furnace fan belt, but more often than not, it was a minor nuisance that either didn't need fixing or was easily fixed by someone in the company. All I had to do was shrug my shoulders and do as ordered. If I didn't obey immediately, the Cold War began. Perhaps I need to describe Joanna in more detail. She's a type A. You know the type. Someone who takes charge and moves things forward. It's good for her job as superintendent. Many new and wonderful programs have been launched during her tenure. She is worth every penny of the exorbitant salary she is paid. She is 5 feet 8 inches tall with shoulder-length brunette hair. Her hazel eyes are piercing. She is fully female but strong-willed and diplomatic depending on the situation. The teachers, staff, and school board seem to love her, and whenever there is a rumor that she might leave, they all band together to prove to her why she should stay put. She handles all the politics, drama, and distractions with grace and a smile. On the other hand, I'm 6'2" and weigh about 200 pounds on a good day. Like I said, I work out at a CrossFit gym and keep up with guys half my age, 46. I used to do a lot of MMA and fought in a few fights. I didn't win them all, but everyone felt they had to work hard to beat an old man. My hair has thinned, but not too much. It's brown with red, and my eyes are blue. I keep my face shaved, mostly for business. Most of my clients seem to prefer it, but when I'm camping or hunting, I don't shave for days at a time. One of my goals is to buy a big motorhome and a motorcycle, more specifically a motorcycle, and travel. My ideal retirement is to travel, park, and camp, and then bike around the local countryside before moving on. Unfortunately, Joanna wants to travel in style and stay in first-class hotels with amenities like pools, spas, and expensive restaurants. Of course, none of this has anything to do with the problem. Joanna wants me to go fix some minor problem with one of my neighbors, and I'm getting tired of it. Not fixing the problem, but the behavior of this or that woman who called. For example, Grace, the first person who called me for help to fix her sprinklers, started hitting on me. I tried to tell her I was happily married, but she responded the same way. She was happily married too, but she and her husband had an agreement and an open marriage. Everything had to be discreet, and she knew I would be discreet. She was very beautiful and very seductive, but like I said, I was happily married. I escaped her clutches. When I got home, Joanna asked me how it went. I simply told her that I was able to do the programming the way Grace wanted. Then she asked how Grace was doing. I was a little puzzled. Finally, I told her the truth. Grace went a little overboard. I don't know what she was selling, but I didn't buy it. Joanna looked disappointed for some reason. When I asked, she immediately brightened up. I'm so upset about Grace, I just can't talk about it. I thought she was a better person. I love you, honey, and I'm proud of you for being so strong in the face of temptation. A couple weeks later, I was asked again to help someone. This has happened over and over again over the past few years. Some of the women blatantly tried to seduce me. Others were a little more circumspect. But each of them had the feeling that I was meat and they wanted to eat steak. I resisted each of them. I am not a player and never have been. I don't know where to start to seduce a woman. My experience before meeting Joanna was limited at best. I just don't know how to read women like one reads a spec sheet. I get along with the women on my team and the women in our neighborhood. I treat them the way I would want my sisters or mother to be treated, with respect and deference. These women who were our neighbors didn't like that. Anyway, it's today, March 12th. The weather is nice, and Joanna just got off the phone with yet another neighbor who wants me to fix something. This is a new neighbor, Gail, who moved into our house a few years ago with her elderly husband. I always wondered if she was a trophy wife because of her age and fantastic looks. She was a very tempting treat, and I didn't trust myself to be around her. Also, Joanna had been kind of aloof lately. I chalked it up to the approaching end of the year and the certification of existing staff, the hiring of new teachers, and my own certification, though I doubted she would have any problems. As I thought about it, she became a little aloof after each of my attempts to help the neighbors solve their problems. Every time I came home, she would ask about the woman I had helped, and I would tell her what I had fixed, and then what the woman had done to show her how much they needed me. Joanna would get angry at all of this and say the woman was a loser, but now she was becoming less attached to me. I would retreat to my work office, I don't have an office at home, and fiddle with one project or another, trying to avoid the dark cloud that had descended on the family. She would turn away from me when I finally dragged myself to bed, but by then I was too tired to try to figure it out. Like I said, I could read a spec sheet or blueprint, but women, even my wife, were much harder to understand and read. Now Gail wanted me to tidy up the filter and pump of her hot tub. Because of the lack of love from my 24-year-old wife and Gail, I was afraid to go alone to her house to fix anything, let alone the hot tub. If I go, Joanna, will you come with me? You're kidding, no, John. You know I have a meeting with the personnel committee today. We have to go through the candidates and decide who we're going to interview. I'd forgotten. I shrugged. Look, I don't trust Gail. She's very seductive, and I know how much you'd be hurt if I went in there and fell into her clutches. I'm sorry, she can call a repairman. Oh, pooh, I don't believe that for a second. She loves her husband and would never do anything to hurt her marriage. She paused and chuckled. You must be delusional if you think she might be tempted to have an affair with you. You're at least 15 years older than she is, and I suppose she could get any young man if she tried to seduce some guy. I think you're safe, old man. The fact that she suddenly called me an old man and implied that I had no appeal stung me, but I stopped the retort that threatened to come off my lips. Where did such a comment come from? She had never made any comments about my age or attractiveness before. So why now, when I just refused to go to the bomb's house and fix her hot tub? Maybe I'm not a good judge of women, but this conversation made me stink more than an 8-day-old fish lying in the sun. What the hell was going on? Joanna went on the attack again. Look, I told Gail you'd be right over. Are you trying to make me look like a liar in front of my friends? Just go over there and fix her damn hot tub, okay? I replied. Actually, I resent the fact that you're willingly assigning me all these minor repairs without even consulting me. What if I have an important meeting while you're setting all this up? What if I have to go out of town for a day for an emergency meeting? After all, I just got back from one of those meetings. I would never have asked you to do any of this for my girlfriends if you weren't standing right here, clearly not going anywhere or doing anything. I'm proud of the fact that you can fix almost anything, and their husbands can't change a light bulb without a manual. You're so much better than either of them. I couldn't help myself. Yeah, that's right. This old man who couldn't attract a love-starved widow is way better than any of our friends. I shook my head in bewilderment. I think Joanna realized the contradiction she had just generated. On the one hand, I was too old to attract any woman, but on the other hand, I was far better than any of our friends because I could solve their petty domestic problems. She resorted to the old adage again. Baby, I love you and you mean the world to me. Could you please help me and fix Gail's hot tub? If I were Spider-Man, I'd say my spider sense is signaling danger. Why is this such a big deal? What's the big deal about getting a simple hot tub ready for nice weather? I stood my ground. No, I'm sick of going to my neighbors and fixing some nonsense, and I'm also sick of fighting off these women. If I was a player, it would be easy in this community, but I'm not a player. I don't want to pursue another woman because I only love you. I paused and threw my best piercing look at her. I don't know what the hell has been going on these past few months, but it suddenly dawned on me that the more I resist their advances, the less you make love to me. So what's the big deal? Do you think I was really having fun with these women when I went to their place to fix things? Is that why you get angry and then treat me coldly for days and weeks after I do this petty work? She tried to downplay her past answers, denying that she had ever done it, but she didn't take my memory into account. I remember the exact dates and things that happened. I started laying them out for her and her reaction every time I came home. It was obvious to me that she thought I was entertaining the whole neighborhood, and that was the reason she was so cold for days or weeks after each repair. She kept denying that she thought like I was entertaining everyone around me. On the contrary, she believed me, so she said. She tried to claim that she was disappointed in her friends because she thought they were clinging to me, but in fact, she claimed that I was making it all up and that none of her friends were actually suggesting that I do it, and that it was all a delusion on my part. I was sick of it. Instead of leaving, I reminded her that she didn't want to be late for the meeting and headed down to the basement to my work office. I had only been there a few minutes when I realized there was no beer in my mini fridge, and I was really thirsty after a full day of work and a fight with Joanna. I went back upstairs to grab a 12-ounce six-pack from the garage and accidentally overheard her talking on the phone. It was just a one-sided conversation, but my spidey sense signaled danger again. Look, I don't know what to do with him. He's been resisting all of you, and now he won't even do the so-called repairs to be alone with him in your house. I think we need to do something different and probably very drastic to get him to agree. I've already told him I have a meeting tonight, so why don't we meet in the community room and try to come up with a new plan? She listened to me for a few moments and then disconnected. I shook my head and went back downstairs to think. Soon she yelled out that she was leaving and left. I figured a phone call would take a few minutes, unless all the women who tried to seduce me had a call list. I had forgotten about group messages since I almost never used them. Suddenly, I remembered that I had a way to eavesdrop on their little meeting. Last year, I had installed a new video system in a small public building next to the community pool and hooked up a webcam to it. Since I had administrative rights, I could control it from my laptop. I quickly booted up the laptop and then ran a program to turn on the webcam. The webcam also had a microphone built into it, so I could hear and see the meeting participants. There were several sluts already present. I carefully and slowly turned the webcam a few degrees so I wouldn't overhear them. They were talking quietly so I couldn't hear them clearly. I started the recording program to get everything I could. After about 10 minutes, there were about a dozen women and a few men in attendance. One of the surprises was my friend, Amos Jones. Everyone knows that Amos and I have been friends for a long time, but they don't know the backstory. We went to rival schools and played football and basketball against each other. I was a 6-foot, 200-pound tight end, and Amos was a 5-foot, 10-inch, 180-pound linebacker. We played against each other several times a year. In basketball, I was an offensive lineman, and he was a defensive lineman, but we often fought on the court. We were very competitive on the field and on the court, but were friends when we weren't facing each other in competition. I am a lily-white Caucasian, and Amos is a black African American. Like I said, we were very competitive on the field and very competitive in our senior year. We were both chasing the same girl who went to a different school. She was a vixen, and we both intended to be her one and only. While playing football, Amos gave me a hard blow to the head during the game. After I fell, he stood over me and said, "That was just a taste of what I can do to you if you don't leave Sharon alone. She'll be mine." My head started ringing, and I started seeing badly for a while. Don't forget, this happened before all this talk and enlightenment about concussions, or I would have just been thrown out of the game. I tried to shake it off, and after a few more games my vision cleared up, but my thoughts were only focused on one thing: getting revenge for the cheap shot. It wasn't long before I was presented with an opportunity. The terms of the play called for me to block an edge rusher and then drift down the center of the field about 5 yards from the line of scrimmage. I was a safety valve in case the play went awry and the quarterback couldn't throw the ball into the far corner. As it happened, he ended up throwing the ball to me. He threw the ball a little higher, and Amos was right next to me as I was trying to catch the ball. I grabbed the ball, pushed off as I was coming down, and caught it behind my right knee. I went another 5 or 6 yards before I was tackled and had to be carried off the field. I didn't have to go up to him and say anything. He knew it was done intentionally. He missed the next few games but was able to come back in a heavy bandage on his knee. It also ruined his basketball season. He couldn't jump like he used to and turn like he did before the injury. We did make up, though. Amos went on to college and played pro ball for a few years until his knee couldn't take it anymore. He was now the successful owner of a number of new car dealerships. When we met at a community event, we renewed our friendship. We watched football together when we could and ridiculed other men who were too good for football or never wore pads, even as small children. It seemed to me that we were very friendly. Now back to the meeting. Joanna finally showed up and became sort of the leader of the meeting. It soon became clear why. I want you all to know that I am disappointed in you for not being able to get my husband to entertain you. As horny as he is, I assumed that at least one of you would get him into bed, or at least into a compromising situation. We planned for each of you to bring your own perspective and approach to the matter, but you all failed miserably. I even made him think I was mad at him after each of your attempts and finally quit having fun for the last few months, but you all failed. I was stunned. I had thought she believed that I had entertained some or all of these women, and that was why she was so aloof after each repair. but now I knew she was angry that I had resisted. What the hell? The thing is, I was so stunned that I had to rewatch the tape over and over again before I fully realized what was going on. Something I had to assume, but the plans they proposed to involve me in their machinations left no doubt once I was able to clearly assess everything. When the men suggested that John join in, I knew he would refuse. The fact that he didn't even bother to discuss it with me left no doubt about his feelings. What he didn't expect was for you women to turn to me at the same time. Although I didn't say no outright, I thought about it. My children were almost grown, and I was set on a career path. John was running his own company, and you all are pillars of society and very reserved. I thought a little play with each other would be nice, but I didn't know how to get John to agree. When we came up with the plan to have him do odd jobs for each of you, I was sure he wouldn't be able to resist at least one of you. You're all very attractive in your own way, and any man would be attracted to you. But he has resisted all of you, and so tonight, he finally said an emphatic no to going to Gale's and working in her hot tub. Then she gave out the following sensation. In my confused mind, I assumed that she wanted to have fun, but wouldn't do it unless I joined in. What a fool I was. I had no problem telling John that I had so many meetings, but I was getting tired of making excuses. I want my husband to join us. I know he could have a great time with you all. So what should we do now? The women then brainstormed ways to engage me. The men were mostly silent. I came to the conclusion that the women controlled the entire group and the men were happy to just go along to get along. Joanna looked at Amos for some sign, but he only shrugged. I wondered how he had gotten involved, since he was a happy bachelor and had always made remarks against marriage and sedentarization. Amos stood up and walked over to Joanna. Look, baby, I know you love the big guy, but I've been telling you all along that he's slowing you down. Why don't you let him go and move in with me permanently? No worries, no fuss, no hassle with me. I realized that Amos wasn't my friend, not anymore. I guess he never got over the knee-bashing incident. I know he now wears a bandage every day just to walk. He must be in constant pain that he keeps from me. Joanna shook her head. No, not yet. I love you both, but I love John more. Everyone else is just different, but not better. I want him to be a part of this. Some of the ideas proposed required me to be robbed and threatened if I didn't agree. Fortunately, most of them were rejected. One couple just wanted to get me drunk at a public party so that I would wake up with one or more women in bed. Of course, I couldn't refute their claims. They thought it would be a fitting payback for all the women distracted by trying to attract me to the group over the past few years. I got the impression that all the men wanted was more access to Joanna. They didn't care if they had to share their woman with another man. Given that Amos was single, they now had parity. If they could just get me to agree to let Joanna play, they would be happy. No more meanness. I also got the impression that they thought they were better than me. I know my eyes narrowed at that thought. I guess I'll have to avoid parties in the future. Amos again offered to address me directly. He hinted that our longtime friendship might make me change my mind. I shook my head at his remark. I would have to figure out how to answer him. My wife ended the meeting with the announcement that she had seduced 3 female teachers and they were looking forward to becoming members of the exchange club. Even the women applauded. I was left with the question, who was this woman I married? I had never guessed her bisexuality. Was it the power she held in society? Had it distorted her value system? I ended the webcam session after they all left the building. I made sure the recording was intact and sent it to the cloud for storage. I had a couple more beers before falling asleep in one of the basement bedrooms we kept on standby for any relatives or other visitors. Chapter 2. Distraction. Before I went to bed, I pulled several empty beer bottles and the ones I had emptied that night out of the trash can and placed them on the nightstand next to the bed. One I put on its side and splashed some beer on the mat. There was a strong odor coming from that drop of beer. I wanted to make Joanna assume I'd had too much to drink, so she'd leave me alone for the night. It must have worked. When I woke up the next morning, there was no sign that Joanna had bothered to check on me except for the overturned bottle, which was now standing upright with the other empty bottles. I smiled to myself. I hadn't had to deal with her last night when she finally came home. I had imagined various scenarios, including her having fun with Amos before coming home after the staff meeting. Now I was wondering how many different meetings, games, etc. she actually attended. How often did she tell me about a mandatory meeting that was really a smokescreen to go and entertain some of the neighbors? God, I could have gone crazy with all these thoughts swirling around in my head. I went upstairs and showered and shaved. I also went to the kitchen and threw a painkiller pill on the counter and left a glass of water there so she'd think I was feeling bad even more. By then, she had already left. Her day always started early, or did it? I was going to drive myself crazy again if I didn't pull myself together. I had always counted on my analytical mind to keep myself in check, and I needed it now more than ever. I called the office to take a sick day. I was actually able to take a few days off since I had some very good people working for me. Sometimes I only felt needed when we had to hold the hand, figuratively speaking, of anxious clients. My presence somehow calmed things down and helped everyone think about the real problem rather than what might happen. I had a vague plan and needed to get some questions answered to figure out where to go next. First, I called my law firm. As a small corporation, we kept the firm on standby for necessary contracts and the occasional disgruntled employee or client who felt they needed to file a lawsuit. The firm practiced corporate law, but had a couple sharks calling themselves divorce attorneys that I could talk to. I called my accountant, and we outlined how to keep the business safe from Joanna in the event of a divorce. He got right down to business. As a corporation, she could only claim stock in the company. I just had to protect her. I sat and pondered the future of my marriage. As I pondered what I had seen and heard, I saw no future. She refused to love me, even when she talked about how much she loved me, and wanted me to have fun with other women so she could continue to desecrate our marriage vows. And then there were the children to think about. Jason was already close to earning his bachelor's degree. He intended to get his master's degree right away before he started working. I still hoped he would come home and work with me, but I understood if he wanted to live on his own for a while. He shouldn't worry too much if Joanna and I split up. We would still be his parents, even if he didn't need us as much. James was different. He was more in touch with his emotional side than Jason was. That's not to say he was a wimp. It's just that at 18, when he was just ready to spread his wings, I worried about how the breakup would affect him. Unfortunately, I envisioned him staying home to comfort his mother instead of heading off to college if we broke up right now. Would I be able to pretend to still love her and act nice enough to distract her from her goals for me? I ran through various scenarios in my head. Should I try to make her believe I was terminally ill, like cancer? Should I try to make her believe I'm becoming an alcoholic? After last night, that might be something to try. I looked up. It was time for lunch. I quickly made a sandwich and started devouring it. I was surprised at my own hunger. I usually completely clean up afterward. I'm a bit obsessed with order and cleanliness, but I forced myself to put the bread away along with the plate and knife. I rinsed my glass and sent the empty beer bottle to the trash can upstairs. Every habit starts small. Maybe in a few days, I'd put the other empty bottles where she could easily find them. The only question was what to leave for her to find: wine, gin, vodka, whiskey, bourbon, or beer bottle. That's a question I'll have to think about a bit more too. At the appointed time, I met with the Sharks. We discussed several issues. When I told them why I was testing my abilities, one of the Sharks snorted derisively. He was obviously a player, so I asked him to leave. Since he worked at the firm, I knew he couldn't represent Joanna, so I wasn't worried about him. I just didn't think he would fervently defend my position if he thought I should just go along with the plans of my wife and her lovers. The other Shark was better at hiding her true feelings. She promised that if I filed for divorce, she would protect my interests to the best of her ability. I logged onto her computer and showed her the video. She told me that it would probably not be admissible in court because no one who was being recorded had authorized it or knew about it, and the premise was semi-public and beyond my control. We agreed that at best the videotaping would give me some leverage against Joanna privately. No one here would want something like this suddenly appearing on the internet out of nowhere. Embarrassing videos could damage careers, and no one would be able to prove their authenticity. After leaving her office, I went to the local Harley dealership and picked out my motorcycle. I chose a touring motorcycle as it was more comfortable for long trips. There was an RV store next door, and I stopped by there and looked around at a few Class A machines for ideas. I envisioned myself wandering the countryside, exploring every corner of our great continent. Some of my plans became more and more definite. I stopped at the local pub and had a couple of mugs of dark ale before heading home. Once home, I spilled some beer on my jacket and stumbled into the house. Although I was by no means drunk, I knew how drunks acted and did my best to portray the perfect drunk to Joanna. She was home and was already starting to get annoyed, as it was about an hour after my usual arrival. She demanded punctuality at all times, and I usually did too. But things were about to change a bit now. "Where have you been?" "I called the office and they said you took sick leave. I called you on the phone, but I got an answering machine." She then took a quick sniff and stated, "You're drunk. What the hell is going on? You never drink more than 1 or 2 beers at a time." I stopped, backed up a little, and stretched out to my full 6-foot height. I considered her questions before raising my hand. I noted each question. I was outside. Then I pointed in the general direction with my other finger and squinted slightly to focus on the tip. I figured if you didn't want to have any more fun, and you said I couldn't attract any women, I should go to the pub and make friends with the old men there. We have a lot in common. I finished, staring at my fingers and then in her direction. I also like the taste of beer, so I've had a couple more glasses than usual. I'm not drunk and I'm always in complete control of myself. She snorted, not believing that I was in complete control of myself and not drunk. It looked like I could act. I tripped over the table and almost hit a chair as I collapsed onto it. "Wow, when did we get a chair?" I laughed at my own comment. Joanna didn't notice the humor. I waved my hand at her dismissively. "What the hell, woman? What's your problem? I've had a couple beers and you're acting like I'm an alcoholic. Am I embarrassing you in some way? Afraid the neighbors will blab?" She threw her hands up in the air. "Damn it, John! Why did you do this today? Amos called and wants to come over to talk to us, and here you are being so brazen." I must have succeeded in pissing her off. She rarely swears, even in a fit of passion. Well, not for me, but I don't know when she's with her other lovers. Maybe with them, she really does loosen her tongue. I shook my head like I was dizzy. I pretended like I was trying to comprehend her comments. "You say Amos is coming. Why would he, since there's no football in March?" It was true. Amos and I had an occasional beer in the off-season, but we didn't really socialize until the season. Joanna tried to take it lightly. "I don't know. He called to talk to you, but you weren't home, and he told me he was going to stop by to ask you something. Are you thinking about a new car or something else?" I shook my head sharply and almost fell over again. He didn't sell motorcycles or vans, so I had no reason to talk to him, but I wouldn't say it. I also couldn't say that I knew he wanted to discuss entertainment with my wife. I got up from the table, walked over to the refrigerator, pulled out another beer, and opened it with feigned difficulty. At the same time, Joanna asked me if I thought another beer was a good idea. I nodded. I tried to keep my voice as slurred as possible and a little louder than necessary. "Yeah, I guess I do think a beer is a good idea. In fact, I think a couple beers is a great idea. I've been holding myself back for too long. My business is failing and my wife doesn't want me anymore. My best friend probably wants to entertain my wife and add her to his harem that he's always bragging about." I fell silent and lowered my head. I thought about my life changing, and not the way I wanted it to, and let a few tears run down my face as I listened to my wife. "What the hell, John? What's going on? What do you mean your business is failing?" She left the rest for now, How can she say she loves me when we haven't had conjugal relations in weeks? The accountant and I were discussing the idea of a failing business. Sure, it was thriving, but she knew nothing about my business. Moreover, she once introduced me as a mechanic rather than a mechanical engineer. With my penchant for fixing broken things, I suppose that's exactly what she thought of me. A regular mechanic who makes very good money. Since she never even looked at our tax form, except to sign it every year, she had no idea how much I made. The accountant decided that this oversight of hers might work in our favor. I shrugged. Where did you hear that? Who said anything about the company? Being drunk, I probably wouldn't remember letting the cat out of the bag. She tried to tell me how she found out. You just told me while you were ranting about being drunk. You said the business was failing. I shook my head again. God, it was so hard not to smile at her now. No, no one knows, not even the managers. How could you possibly know? Don't hate me for being a loser. I finally stumbled my way to my room, collapsed into my favorite chair, and pretended to pass out. Joanna came in and tried for several minutes to bring me to my senses, but I continued to feign unconsciousness, even as she rubbed my chest vigorously. An experienced paramedic once told me that this kind of stimulation is most often used to wake someone up, but a patient who knows the trick doesn't respond to pain. He always used other unpleasant ways to induce a pain response and told me a few of them. The doorbell rang, and Joanna had to give up trying to bring me to consciousness for a few minutes while she went around and let Amos in. She spent a few more minutes informing him of my intoxicated state and lack of response. After a few more minutes, during which I figured he was trying to get a kiss, hug, or other favor from her, he gave up and entered the den. I closed my eyes, feeling him looming over me. This could have gotten serious. Amos could hurt me and probably would. Since I now knew he didn't love me, I could have been seriously hurt. With my eyes closed, I wouldn't even realize where the blow was coming from. He touched my shoulder and called my name. I didn't answer. He tapped harder and called my name again. He slapped my face lightly and called my name again. I groaned slightly but didn't open my eyes. He slapped me again, a little harder. A few more slaps like that and there would be a very red mark on one side of my face. I groaned again and swung away from his hands. I felt his satisfied smile. John, you stupid asshole. Every time I entertain her, I think about what an ignorant, stupid bastard you are. He hit me harder. The sound echoed around the room. I don't know where Joanna was, but she didn't say a word to stop him. I figured he asked her not to leave the room while he woke me up. The time had come. I opened my eyes slightly to make sure of his exact location. I started waving my arms around as if to ward off the pain he was causing me. When he tried to dodge them, I struck with my foot and caught his sore knee again. Despite the fact that he always wore a bandage, I hit him in the kneecap. Out of surprise, he shrieked and fell to the floor. I leaned forward and whispered in his ear. If I ever see you again, asshole, I will destroy you for entertaining my wife and pretending to be my friend. At the very least, I'll make sure you can never walk again. I don't know if anything penetrated his pain-filled brain, but I was relieved. I rose to my feet and, remembering to feign drunkenness, left the room. As I was leaving, Joanna entered the room, no doubt to find out why Amos was suddenly screaming in pain. We met in the doorway. I stumbled, as if on purpose, and pushed her toward the door. I mumbled something about feeling nauseous and left her trying to regain her balance and headed for the nearest bathroom. At the door, I stopped and looked around. Joanna was nowhere to be seen. I guess she was sympathizing with her lover and trying to ease his pain. I got up, got out of the garage, and drove away before she could react. A few blocks from the gate, I was stopped by a black and white car. I wasn't driving too fast, and I had a suspicion that my loving wife had called 911 to report a drunk driver making a disturbance. I pulled over. As the officer approached the car, I noticed his partner approaching from the other side. I guess now I was the bad guy. I rolled down the window to give the officer a chance to talk to me. He asked me to step outside. I admitted that I had had a few beers earlier. I passed a field sobriety test and even a breathalyzer. We talked for a while as the tension eased. I tried very hard to be pleasant and frank with them. I even told them about my problems with Joanna. But I didn't say anything about the attack on Amos. That might have turned them against me. Obviously, she didn't call them to tell them about the attack. While we were talking, an ambulance whizzed by and headed into a gated neighborhood. Did Amos need an ambulance? Probably, but I may never know. The cops let me go and told me to change my clothes, since mine reeked of beer. I agreed with them. I got back in my car and waited around the corner until an ambulance pulled up, presumably headed for the hospital, but not with flashers and siren. Right after that, Joanna pulled up in her car. I assumed she would be holding her lover's hand while he was being treated for a new knee injury. I returned home, grabbed my clothes, and packed a bag. She might have assumed I'd been arrested. There's no reason to make her think otherwise. Tomorrow, I'll have my lawyer contact her to get bail money. I went to a nice hotel to get some sleep. I had a meeting with a client in the morning. Chapter 3. Disappointment. The next day, my lawyer contacted Joanna before she could leave for school. She informed her that I had been arrested for DUI and that bail was 10% of $10,000. Joanna argued with her about whether to bail me out of jail, but finally agreed. I was left wondering if she really loved me if she would argue about whether to keep me in jail for my first DUI offense. After talking to my lawyer on the phone, I shook my head. I had things to do. After work, I called Amos's cell phone. When he answered, I asked what he wanted to talk to me about last night. I pretended I didn't remember anything about the night before, and he probably bought it. He hesitated, but never answered me. I suppose he saw fit to be in my face when he said he was entertaining Joanna. I didn't care, and I wasn't going to waste my time visiting him in the hospital. He told me he had a shattered kneecap. I made the appropriate noises and ended the conversation. It was time to visit the pub again. I had a couple of mugs of tasty ale again before heading home. This time, Joanna wasn't there. She had left a note saying she was going to a meeting at one of the schools. Yeah, I bet, I almost wrote in the note, but held myself back. I made myself a light dinner and left it all out again. Then I went down to the basement to my workroom and tackled an old project. I won't bore you with the details, but I'd put it up, leave it alone for a while, then I'd get a new idea, pull it out, and try to get it working. I fiddled with it for a while, but found that I still didn't have the breakthrough I needed. I put it back on the shelf again, just as Joanna came home. Opening my eyes, I noticed that she had just showered. Yes, I guess the mandatory meeting was just around the corner, at one of the neighbors. I needed to get this over with before someone set me up. Honey, how are you? She didn't pounce on me this time. I shrugged. I don't know why you're asking. This is the second time this week you've left food and dishes behind after you've eaten dinner. Are you mad at me for being gone so much right now? I really wanted to tell her how angry I was that she was screwing with me, but I held back. I tried to minimize her concern. I'm sorry. I got distracted. Let me go upstairs and get my things in order. I slipped past her and headed upstairs without saying anything else. It was only 10 minutes later and the mess was over. I got a beer out of the fridge. She followed me down the stairs. Since she almost never went downstairs, she had no reason to linger there. Are you sure you should be drinking? I objected. Why not? I'm in my own house. My keys are on the hook, and I'm not going out anywhere else. I can get drunk in my own house, can't I? John, I'm afraid for you. You've suddenly started drinking more than you ever have before. Last night you got so drunk you passed out in your chair in the living room. When your best friend Amos tried to wake you up somehow, you kicked him and sent him to the hospital. Then you left the house and drove away. The next thing I heard was that you were arrested and put in jail and I had to bail you out. You told me last night that the business was in trouble and then asked where I heard that when I asked you for more information. I think you had a blackout and didn't realize what you were doing. That, And the fact that you left food behind and didn't clean up after yourself, which you never do, scares me a little. She paused and looked into his face. Talk to me, John. Tell me what the hell is going on, please. She reached for my hands, but I didn't raise mine to take hers. She dropped her hands and started crying. Somehow, I wasn't too concerned about her worries and anxieties. I took a good sip of my beer as she collapsed into a chair and continued to cry. I made my way to the living room and sat in the chair. After a while, she managed to regain her composure a little. She came in and sat down across from me. I'm sorry for the outburst, but I need you to talk to me, honey. Is there anything I can do to help? I wanted so badly to yell at her and tell her to go back in time and not let herself cheat on me. But I didn't because she couldn't, and didn't believe she even wanted to. She just wanted me to go along with her lifestyle, and that wasn't happening either. I decided to be honest, up to a point. I don't know what you can do to change the outcome. It's too late for that now. I just need time and some space to figure things out. I stood up and walked around the spacious room. With James leaving the house soon and moving out, I'm wondering why we need a house with 6 bedrooms and 8 bathrooms. Maybe we should save a little money. We could save a lot of money on house maintenance and electricity if we move to a smaller house. We're always too busy to use the hot tub or pool. Since she left earlier than me in the morning and was in a meeting almost every night, she didn't know how often I used the pool to keep myself in shape. Joanna didn't want any of that. No, I wanted this house, and it's perfect for us. I sincerely hope the boys get married, and I want them and other family and friends to have a place where they can come and make themselves at home. I love this neighborhood and our neighbors, and can't imagine leaving them. Yes, it would disrupt your life if we moved, I thought. What about us, my dear? When will we have time for us? I know I'm busy, but I can start delegating some of my responsibilities so we can spend more time together. We don't have any me time at all. I can't remember when we have actually had time together to at least hold hands and make love. We don't go out or have dinner together unless it's business or school system related. Nick, can you find someone else to attend those mandatory evening meetings and such? Can we make time for ourselves? Of course, she brushed it off. I'm often home in the evenings when you're not. Maybe we should plan our evenings better. I, for one, would like to go to neighborhood get-togethers more often. The wives are always telling me how much they miss us and how much fun they have. I waved my hand dismissively. I think that's nonsense, Joanna. I'm home at least 5 out of 7 nights a week. You always come over or call and let me know you have some emergency, a scheduled meeting, a game, or whatever, and then you're out the door. You come home hours later and are too tired to talk to me before bed. With the huge bed in our bedroom, we don't even touch when we occupy it at the same time. Thank goodness for the brown bottle. From a few feet away, she couldn't tell I hadn't drunk all the beer. I held it like it was almost empty. Damn, I'm out of beer again. I'll be right back. I turned and went into the kitchen, and since she couldn't see what I was doing, I poured the leftovers down the drain and got a new bottle. I realized I needed to buy more beer. I'll have to buy a couple cases tomorrow. When I got back to the living room, Joanna gave my beer a dirty look. I took a healthy sip and wiped my mouth. Since we can't agree on anything, I think I'll retire to my workroom and try to figure out how we can continue to afford this monstrosity. I didn't wait for her response, but simply turned and walked down to the basement workroom. I realized she had no intention of changing anything other than my approval of her extramarital affairs. With her income, she was able to maintain the house, pay the utilities, and even the HOA dues. At least they covered the cost of the lawn and landscaping. Around midnight, I went upstairs, showered, brushed my teeth, and rinsed my mouth with fresh mint rinse to drown out the taste of beer, then climbed into bed, careful not to touch her sleeping figure. I decided to call her secretary and ask if there was going to be an evening meeting. When I was told that Joanna's calendar was clear, I made a reservation at one of the best restaurants in town. I figured she would come home or call about some meeting and I would have to cancel, but I would play on her emotions while I could. My attorney called me around 9 o'clock and we had a long meeting. He went over my options regarding the business, and we were going to put all the stock and control into a trust, and Joanna wouldn't be able to touch it at any time since none of the stock was in her name. Her lawyer would be in the shit when he found out. Then I could become a freelance consultant and get paid directly by the company. Sure, the consultant's fee could be equal to my salary and profit from the corporation, but she wouldn't know that. Then I went back to the RV store and negotiated a good price on a great Class A car. I also bought an enclosed trailer and had it wrapped in the color of the van. The van had 3 folding sides and would make a great moving home for me. I had satellite phone service to keep me up to date. Most campgrounds had internet access so I could keep in touch with the office. My cell phone was a national carrier and worked in most places I went, and I could work when it suited me. I was able to fly back or to a client if needed, and then fly back to the RV. We did all the paperwork, and I negotiated a price to leave the RV in the parking lot for a few days. I needed to get all of my personal items I wanted out of the house and try to do it in a way that Joanna wouldn't alert me before I was ready. I really thought I should get back at the neighbors, especially those who advocated extreme measures to hold me accountable and humiliate me at the same time. But going to law enforcement about a conspiracy to harm me wouldn't do any good, and several of the neighbors were judges and lawyers. I could embarrass them, but not do them much harm at the moment. I just needed to get away. I considered divorce but decided I was in no hurry to change my wayward wife, so why not just leave? A good private investigator would be able to find me, but I didn't run or even try to hide. I just got out of here before something bad happened. I took home extra beer, some vodka, and whiskey, and made sure the seals were broken and some were missing so Joanna could see I was drinking more. The whiskey tasted nice as I took a couple shots to get my breath smelling. I waited until 6 o'clock before calling Joanna's cell phone. She answered on the 4th ring, just before it went to voicemail. She was brief with me. "What do you need?" "I'm busy right now." "Really, dear? How can you be busy?" "I called your secretary today, made sure you had a free evening, and made reservations at the Tuscan Inn for dinner, but you never came home or called. What the hell is going on?" She couldn't answer anything intelligible. I figured she was well entertained by someone in the neighborhood and hung up. I'd have to speed up my plans. I couldn't take it much longer. If I thought about it too long, I might pull out a gun and shoot someone, and that someone might be the one who had once been the love of my life. I went downstairs and started gathering my tools. She wouldn't notice they were gone. I carried the boxes to the car and put them in the trunk. It would take a few trips. I ordered cabinets and workbenches for the trailer so the tools would always be on hand when I traveled. I packed the few tools in the garage that I took with me. Even though the lawn is taken care of by the HOA, we had tools for gardening, etc., and I left them behind. Maybe Joanna will ask one of her lovers to do some gardening, which we did. The rest of the equipment was boxed up and ready to be used whenever I wanted it. Then I started going through my clothes. There was God knows how much room in the van, but I wouldn't need that many suits after I left. I sorted through my clothes for a few hours until I was hungry enough that I couldn't ignore the rumbling in my stomach anymore, so I stopped and made another sandwich. God, I was so sick of cold sandwiches. Now I was furious, so I left all the ingredients on the counter. To hell with it! What the hell? It wasn't even late afternoon yet. I grabbed a few more boxes, filled up the car, and headed to the office. We had a large warehouse, and my tools and other equipment could be stored there for days. It took a few trips, but all my belongings and clothes were safely stowed. I could leave the house at a moment's notice if I deemed it necessary. I even opened the gun safe and took a couple of pistols out of there, as well as a shotgun and a couple rifles. Joanna didn't know the combination, so she would have to call a locksmith to open the safe and retrieve all the other weapons I was leaving behind. She couldn't stand guns, so having guns in the house without my presence might have bothered her. Though maybe not, since she didn't seem to want to spend any time there. When I got home from my last trip to the office, Joanna was home. I just walked in and poured myself a couple fingers of whiskey while she tried to talk to me. For some reason, all I could hear at this point was the adult from the Charlie Brown cartoon. Wah, 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 wah. And so on. For a few minutes, I stood with my back to her, savoring the taste of the smooth bourbon. When I turned around, her face was red and she seemed upset about something. Did you say something, honey? I did my best to keep my speech a little slurred as I said it. Yes, John, I did. I've been trying to find out where you've been all evening. I came home right after you called, but you weren't here. I thought we could go out some more, but you weren't here. I nearly burst out laughing at her audacity. She really wanted me to believe that she rushed home and that I wasn't home. Until I told her exactly what I was doing, I couldn't call her bluff. So I lied to cover up her lie. You were so upset when I called you, I decided to go out and get something to eat after I made a cold sandwich and canceled my order. I wanted a warm meal and some company, and you weren't here, and I don't cook, so I had to go out. I let myself move a little, standing as tall as I could. Her eyes narrowed again. How much have you had to drink tonight? Apparently not much, since I still understand what you're getting at. I had a couple drinks before I left, a couple drinks during the meal, and another when I got home. In 3 or 4 hours, that's not much. Surprisingly, she didn't believe me. Bullshit. You have slurred speech and you can't stand without almost falling over. How dare you drive drunk? You've already been caught once this week for drunk driving, and now you're flirting with danger again. I decided to make a little joke. Flirting with what? You forgot I'm an old man and can't attract anyone, so why am I flirting and who am I flirting with? She started to blush even more. I continued. Who was I flirting with? Was she pretty or was she a dog? Oh well, maybe I'll find a girl with a dog face to date me. All kitties are gray in the dark, you know. I started giggling at my own joke, and Joanna went into the bedroom and slammed the door shut. Oops, looks like I'm going to have to lay down somewhere else. Damn it, I thought I was being quite witty. She just didn't have a sense of humor anymore. I went to one of the other bedrooms, the farthest from the master bedroom. I took a shower, though I had no soap, and wiped myself down with a guest towel. Joanna would be furious, but what else was new? I had gotten a good night's sleep and was pleased that she was already up and out in the morning. I took another shower in the master bath, this time with soap, and got ready for work. I made sure the rest of the clothes I would be taking with me were moved and ready to go. What the hell, I thought. I might as well pack them in a couple suitcases. We had plenty of them. Soon they were packed and I set them in a corner of the garage. Joanna parked next to the inside door so she would have no reason to look where I had put the suitcases. I went to the bank and opened new savings and checking accounts and transferred half of our money into them. I found out that Joanna had set up a separate savings account into which her checks were deposited, and then a certain amount was transferred to our joint account each pay period. Since I didn't have access to the account, I had no idea what the balance was in it, but it looked like she was planning to leave me sometime in the future. Where was the woman I married? I called and took my name off all the joint credit cards and put a couple new ones in my name only. We usually only kept a small balance on each card and only used them for emergencies, so it wasn't hard to convince the company to honor my request. I then called and took my name off the utility bills for the house. I also made sure that the utilities for the company were in her name only. When we started the business, all utilities had to be in our name because the company did not yet have a credit history. I didn't know if they were ever changed and was glad they were. Joanna couldn't disrupt the flow of business. I then met with my senior staff. We established a new reporting hierarchy and set ground rules for contacting me in case of emergencies. Realistically, I believed that I would only be contacted when a client simply could not be dealt with in a timely manner and that I would be the last person to try to save the day. I let them all know what was going on in my personal life, just enough for them to realize that Joanna and I were separating and possibly going through a divorce. They didn't need to know all the details. They understood everything. More than half of the staff had gone through major breakups in their personal relationships. I ended the meeting by promising to throw a celebratory party on Saturday. I felt we were getting close to that. I went back to my office and put away some very personal items, awards, prototypes, models, and the like. Soon they were boxed up and put away in the pantry to deal with later. At 11 o'clock, I was surprised by a phone call from Joanna. Since we hadn't officially broken up yet, I hadn't alerted the receptionist to check my calls. I decided to be polite. After all, I was supposed to be sober for the day. Hello, Joanna. How are you doing this morning? She paused for a moment before she spoke. I'm sorry, John, but I left without letting you know that we're invited to a wine tasting at Gail and Lester's house tonight. Will you be able to attend? My spidey sense suddenly fluttered again. Could this really be the evening? Did they intend to stupefy me? And more importantly, how do I escape their clutches? The wine at such parties was poured in advance and brought on trays. It was easy to slip something into one of the glasses and then be sure to pass it to me. She waited for an answer. I'm looking at my schedule for the day, Joanna, and I don't see anything for tonight. What time do we need to be there? I'm going straight to Gail's after work, but I need you to pick up a few different wines so we have a variety to sample. Could you do that and be there around 7 o'clock? Sure. How about dinner or lunch as your friends usually call it? One of the reasons I'll be there early is to help with all the appetizers. There should be plenty and variety enough to satisfy your appetite so you can gorge yourself on whatever your heart desires. Damn. More ways to stupefy someone. I can dodge the wine, but how do I dodge the food? I made the appropriate noises and hung up. Now what? Unless I can come up with a plausible reason to avoid tonight's meeting, it's going to look suspicious. There hadn't been any invitations to neighborhood get-togethers for some time now. If it weren't for the fact that I am suspicious of all neighbors, and especially my friend Amos, I might have fallen for this nonsense. Since the event was not in a community building, I couldn't peek at the preparations and try to determine how dangerous it was. I decided to participate and went to a large bottle store a few blocks from the gates of our congregation. I grabbed a dozen bottles of wine and then stopped for a moment at a nearby national chain drugstore. Stashing the surprise in my pants pocket, I removed my tie and undid the top button on my shirt. I needed to act casual. I parked the car in front of the house and headed over to Gail and Lester's with 2 large bags of wine. At their house, I went around to the back door and entered the kitchen, hoping to have time to talk a little before they realized I was there. I was in for a disappointment. The kitchen crew had obviously been hired specifically for this occasion and shouldn't have been privy to any shenanigans. I set the wine on the handy counter and quietly made my way to the front rooms. Joanna and Gail were having a quiet conversation that I couldn't overhear and quickly stopped when Gail spotted me. She waved me over, gave me a quick hug, and asked how I was doing. I lied and said I was feeling fine, but my stomach was a little upset tonight. Joanna made an appropriate comment about taking care of myself, and soon we were discussing wine and cheese selections. They were also setting up a fondue pot and a variety of cheeses, meats, and vegetables. It all looked quite appetizing and innocent. Too bad I didn't trust anyone else. I figured they hadn't had a chance to call for wine or food yet, so I grabbed a plate and exclaimed that I was starving, haphazardly picking food off the plates on the table. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Joanna and Gail exchanging glances. Joanna was trying to talk me into waiting. Honey, can't you wait until the others get here? It seems a little rude when you start eating right away like that. Honey, I'm too hungry to wait. It was a lot of work today and I only had a couple crackers for lunch. I need to eat something or I won't be able to taste much wine before I get intoxicated. She backed off a little. I smiled to myself that I managed to get to the food before it was spiked. I hoped to get to the wine quickly as well. It could wait. There was a coffee pot on the table and I poured myself a cup. It had to be safe since it was the only coffee pot on the table. After about 20 minutes, most of the regulars were in, and the wine flowed in a river. There were a couple new faces as well. I figured they must be the teachers Joanna had promised to bring. I walked over and talked to them for a few minutes. They were young and fresh out of college. I wasn't too worried about them. They knew what they were getting into. It was time to get to the show. Several of the wives tried to talk me into more wine, but I waved them off, saying my stomach was a little upset today. Finally, I took the glass offered to me, It was white wine, and I could see a few specks in it. I thanked the woman who took it from the tray. After saluting her, I sipped the wine and swished it around in my mouth to get a full taste. I turned around and poured 30 milliliters of ipecac syrup into the glass. Turning back around, I announced that it was a great wine and drained the glass in one fell swoop. I was hoping the ipecac would kick in sooner. Ipecac syrup is supposed to take effect in about 5-10 minutes, and at the 5-minute 45-second mark, my stomach rumbled and I suddenly rushed toward the hallway bathroom. I barely made it to the bathroom before I started vomiting all over again. Since I didn't have any other symptoms of drug intoxication, I figured I had probably dodged a bullet. A few minutes later, I was already wondering about my level of intelligence as I was throwing up everything I had taken sometime after breakfast. Now I had dry waves and was drinking from the bathroom faucet to get at least something into my stomach. God, my guts ached. Joanna was standing outside the door asking if I was okay. I smiled through the aches and dry heaving pain. She never helped when either of us were sick. When we were sick, she'd throw up with me or one of the boys, so she tried to stay away when one of us was spewing our guts out. I was counting on it. When the strongest contractions in my stomach were over, I asked Joanna to help me get home so I could lie down. She tried to talk me into staying at Gale's, but I convinced her that I needed to go home where I would be comfortable. I apologized to the rest of the group as we headed for the exit. It only took a few houses before we entered our house. I refused to call it home anymore. I let Joanna take me to my bedroom, and after undressing, I laid down on the bed. I told her that I was starting to feel dizzy. She made appropriate remarks and even took my temperature. It was normal. I let my speech get a little slurred as I told her I loved her and thanked her for being my nurse. After a few minutes, I pretended to pass out and waited to see what she was going to do next. I assumed they were planning for me to get confused and not be able to stop them. I wondered if she would continue with her plan even though I was nauseous. She made a few more soothing noises before leaving the room. I could already hear her talking on her cell phone as she walked down the hallway. Time to get moving. I got out of bed. It wasn't fast as my gut ached from vomiting. I walked out of the bedroom and snuck down the hallway to where I could hear her. We have to do it tonight or wait another week or two. Yeah, bring the guys. Then she hung up the phone. Tonight was definitely the night, and I needed to be somewhere else. I waited until she left for the kitchen and snuck to the front door. Failure awaited me there. Someone was already coming up the walkway. I ducked into the closet next to the door and hid behind my coat. 5 or 6 people came in with cameras and lights. I was going to be a star, not. They all quietly made their way to the bedroom, and I took the opportunity to jump out of the closet and then out the front door. I ran to the main gate of the settlement. The gate was locked, but it only took dialing a code to get it to open. As they opened, I heard someone from my house calling my name. What fools they were if they thought I would answer. I felt a little dizzy and realized I couldn't run too fast, or I would fall. I hid in the bushes that were on either side of the gate until the dizziness passed a little. While I was hiding, someone came to the gate and checked to see if there was any sign that I was near the gate. Once satisfied with that, he stepped back. It was too dark to see who it was, but I didn't care. I just needed to get farther away. I headed for a convenience store about 6 blocks away. I jogged for a while, then walked. I kept in the shadows as much as possible. Thanks to the dark clothes I always wore, I seemed to blend in with the night. If I wasn't spotted by silhouette, I was safe from prying eyes until I got to the parking lot. There was a very bright light burning there, but I didn't go inside. I stayed on the periphery and called a cab to come and pick me up. When the cab arrived, I asked it to drive haphazardly around the neighborhood and then take me to my hotel. There I experienced a few moments of frustration when the night clerk was reluctant to give me a room, as I clearly had no luggage. I had to call the manager who checked my ID before I could go up to my room. I was sweating a bit. In the lobby, I was vulnerable. Joanna and friends could spout some nonsense to the staff and shove me out the door while everyone tried to figure out what to do, but in the room, I could pick the lock and not worry about it. Locking the door to the room securely, I breathed a sigh of relief. I checked my cell phone. I'd set it on silent mode when I'd gotten to Lester's place and hadn't checked it since. There were tons of calls, text, and voice messages from Joanna, and a few from other people. I deleted them all. I no longer cared what she wanted or thought. I was sure the cameras had been installed so I could be blackmailed and forced to do whatever they wanted. What I didn't count on was a visit from the police. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, there was a knock on my door. I hesitated to answer it, but the knocking continued and I heard a muffled, "Police, open the door." I looked through the peephole and saw the badges. There were 3 of them. I opened the door but didn't remove the chain. "What can I do for you, officers?" "Please, sir, open the door. We have been informed that you have been ill this evening. Your wife is concerned that you may have been delirious because she left you in bed, and when she returned a few minutes later to check on you, you were gone. We ended up having to run your cell phone to locate you." "Well, officer, were you at the house?" "Yes, officers were at your house to take a report and get your description." "Were there a lot of people there?" "I think so, yes. Your wife let us know that before she called us in, she called the neighbors to comb the neighborhood." "Did your coworkers note whether these concerned neighbors had cameras and flashlights?" He nodded. "It was noticed, but not questioned." "Well, officer, I want to tell you a story, but I know it will be hard to believe. I don't want any investigation as the story is strange, but I assure you that I am in my right mind at this moment." I opened the door and motioned for them to come in. I had rented a suite, so there was plenty of room for them to sit comfortably while I told them my story. Before I started, I got them something to drink from the minibar, non-alcoholic of course, and then told them my whole sad story. Sometimes they interrupted me to clarify something, but in general they listened without much disbelief. Apparently, they had heard so many similar stories over the years. The final convincing moment was when I showed them the video I had taken. It seemed like such a long time ago, but it had only been a week or so since this part of the crazy business had started. I was beginning to wonder if I was going crazy. So much change in such a short period of time can lead to delirium. One of the officers informed me that they could have taken everything I said and the videotape to the district attorney, but they saw one of the judges on the video. It seemed to them that it would make it all go away in the shadows. I agreed. "Look, guys, I only told you guys my whole story so you could go back and report to my wife and her friends that I'm okay. I sincerely hope you don't have to report my whereabouts, or I'll be forced to change hotels and destroy my phone." They assured me that they were only interested in my well-being. As an American citizen with rights, they cannot force me to contact my wife or return home. They wished me well and left. Chapter 4. Leaving. I had slept well. Maybe it was the thought that all this shit would be over soon, but I slept well. I got up and ordered room service food and then ate a balanced and healthy breakfast. Then I called my sons and told them I was going on an extended vacation. I told them that their mother would not be coming with me, as she felt she could not leave the school system for that long. They knew of her commitment to the schools and bought the story. I promised to keep in touch. I called the office and learned that Joanna had already been there several times. I informed them that the plan was going into effect a little early and that I probably wouldn't be back in the office for the foreseeable future. They all agreed and put the plan in motion. I was now free to go. I made inquiries at the car dealership, and the trailer was ready in the early part of the week. All I had to do was hide out for a few more days. That gave me time to work. I went to the cell phone salesman, bought a new phone with a new number, and transferred my contacts. The old phone remained charged and ready to be a decoy if needed. I would use it to contact the boys until it was time to throw it away. I spent the weekend without too much trouble. I had the room registered in the trust's name, and Joanna didn't even know it existed. It was exactly the same with the van and the motorcycle. Saturday night, I met my staff at another hotel, and we had a great time if it weren't for Joanna's sudden appearance in the room. One of my staff members had apparently inadvertently let her know what we were doing that weekend. I couldn't blame him or her, whoever it was, as not all of the staff were privy to the true reason for our celebration. The public invitation was a thank you for a year well spent. Only the senior staff knew that it was a farewell to me. But it didn't matter much, as she showed up already late in the evening. I was sitting in the back of the room discussing with the new CEO, Harold Devers, some minor projects I was going to continue working on when I noticed her. She had sought me out, but without much success at first. I simply excused myself to Harold and headed for a side exit nearby. For some reason, I almost expected Joanna to know about the little celebration, so as I entered the banquet hall, I looked around for the other exit. It was out into the hallway, and soon I was outside and headed for another hotel a block away. Once in there, I quickly got a room for the night and then went and locked up again. Harold called me later and told me that Joanna had made a bit of a scene when she realized I had run away. She even called Harold and his wife a couple or three names when they informed her that she wasn't welcome here and asked her to leave. I wondered if the message had gotten through to her, but mentally shrugged it off as that question may never be answered. On Monday, I picked up my new Harley and parked it next to the trailer. My tools were stored in various lockers and drawers. Clothing and personal items were quickly organized into their various storage locations, and I was almost ready to hit the road. There was only one thing left to do. I started my motorcycle and headed towards my old house. It was mid-morning, and I knew Joanna had to be at work. I didn't bother to stay late. Since I had left Friday night on foot, my car was still parked in the garage. Joanna wasn't home. I breathed a sigh of relief that I wouldn't have to face her right away. Yes, call me a coward, but somewhere in the back of my mind I still loved the woman I married. I just didn't like the woman I was now married to. I went to the kitchen, put the note on the table, and attached my wedding ring to it. Along with it, I left the flash drive as well. I carefully considered, typed, edited, and finally printed the note. I hoped it explained everything I was feeling, and I hoped Joanna would take it to heart. Joanna, I hope you understand why I don't begin the address with dear or my beloved. A few weeks ago, it became painfully obvious that you were pushing me to do something I didn't want to do. For some reason that only you can explain, women in our gated community were trying to seduce me, and you were not only frustrated that I was resisting their attempts, but you were probably the instigator yourself. I know you will immediately try to contact me and deny everything, but I suggest you look at the file on the flash drive I left you. I'm only going to say this once. If I believe that someone is trying to find me, or even contact me with the intent to do me any harm, I will post that file on every website I can think of. While commenting on it is not illegal, the stigma should be a career killer for anyone caught on video. I successfully evaded your attempts to seduce me into your little group. I bet you didn't think I knew what your plans were for the night. Remember when you review the video that it was suggested that you blackmail me into submission. I planned how you would do it. It was wise that you instructed me to get most of the wine for the party, then I wouldn't be able to tell that the wine had been spiked before. I took the ipecac syrup immediately after tasting the first glass I was given. It was a difficult moment between vomiting and dizziness, but I managed to keep my balance and make it home. How surprised were you and all your buddies when you led them all with cameras into the bedroom and I was gone? I bet they were all disappointed in you. You were supposed to deliver me to them so they could play their sick games, but I wasn't there. You told them off in a meeting and then you couldn't keep me in my own bedroom. By the way, you are now responsible for all remaining mortgage payments, insurance, taxes, and utilities, and of course HOA dues. In addition, the business is not failing. On the contrary, it is growing and expanding beautifully. However, you can't get to any of the assets. The corporation has been put into a trust, as a politician does after being elected. All of his assets should be placed in a trust so as not to give the appearance of wrongdoing. As I travel and see this glorious country, I will have almost no income. I will probably do some freelance consulting from time to feed myself. By the way, get one of your goddamn lovers, preferably a lawyer, to handle the breaking up of the trust. I almost dare you. If you try to do that, my lawyer has a videotape and would be happy to put it out in the public domain. I'm sure some social media outlets will be happy to make you all look like conniving assholes. Maybe even some of the yellow tabloids would want that information. You would look so good on the cover of the newspaper at the grocery store. I loved you and wish I could find the woman I married. I miss the loving woman you were, not the manipulative, cold-hearted, and calculating bitch you have become. Is it because of the power you have, or the prestige you have in society, that you believe you can do whatever you want, and that there will be no consequences? I have informed Jason and James that I will be out of the area for a while, and they will contact me as needed. I have also informed them that you are too busy with schoolwork to come with me. Anything else you want to tell them is up to you. I don't want a divorce at this time. It would cost too much, although I could demand alimony from you since on paper, you make a lot more money than I do. The fact that I am worth more is irrelevant. If you want a divorce, you'll have to file and pay the costs. I'm not going to fight you. You can sue me in a year and it won't matter if you find me then. What I can say is this. I am mortally disappointed in what you are doing in the club and wanted to do to me and make me do. You obviously have no love left for me. I don't care if you deny it, but what you are doing is not the act of a loving and caring wife. You are now free to do whatever you want, with whomever you want, including that asshole Amos. I won't stand in your way anymore. I don't know why I asked the questions in that note, because I'm not coming back to ask you to explain yourself again. My don't care is over, and I look forward to a time of healing away from you. By the time you read this letter, I will be hours away. Pick a direction, and you might be right. Also, don't try to find me on the phone again. What I don't forgive is actual stupefaction. The phone is used by my sons, but it will be discarded as soon as I feel you are following me or even trying to follow me. I already have another phone and a new number. And finally, have a happy life. I intend to. I hope you'll forgive me for not signing off with Love, John. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.